Wait, you have a TV?
No. I just like to read the TV guide. Read the TV guide. You don't need a TV. Television addict! Television addict! Television addict!
Hey everybody, welcome to TV Guidance Counselor. I, of course, am Ken Reed, your TV Guidance Counselor, here to discuss classic television with fascinating people using back issues of TV Guide magazine from my personal collection as our gateway into our collective past. My Boston accent has been getting bad lately. I wonder if it's just because I've been in lockdown for so long. I'm here. For those of you checking out the show for the first time, maybe because my guest this week is somebody that you love, and you should. I am a Boston-based stand-up comedian, currently on hiatus due to COVID restrictions. But I've been doing the show since 2014. We have almost 500 episodes, and each and every week I discuss what someone would watch historically using these back issues of TV Guide. This week is one of my favorite episodes of the year. Since lockdown, I've been doing the show exclusively remotely, and as a result, I've gotten to talk to a lot of people that I don't necessarily have access to or am not necessarily in the same city with that often, and I haven't really been going down to New York as much as I used to in the last couple of years because my soul can't take it, but this guest is New York based, and I was so glad to talk to her. My guest this week is Peppermint, who you may know from RuPaul's Drag Race and a million other things she's done. Super talented, really funny singer, super smart. She's got a new EP out called A Girl Like Me, Letters to My Lovers, Volume 1. As a fellow person who released a record titled Volume 1, I put out my second stand-up comedy record was called The Vanity Project, Hollywoodland. Volume 1, in an anticipation of doing other volumes that I haven't done. I appreciate that, although I'm certain she's doing more than one volume, but just so good. I love talking to her, and it was fantastic. One thing to note, occasionally there's some technical issues. I have backups of all my recordings in case like my first good quality one fails. This one I had a little bit of issue with the audio, so I cleaned it up. But the content is so good. So if you can look past that for a moment, but I just wanted to give you a heads up. And I know some people have emailed me and reached out about that sort of thing. Content's great in this, but you know, it's Peppermint mic was a little hot, so I potted it down a little, smoothed it out a little bit. But just so you know, I know, and I apologize. But again, such a good chat that I would not want to rob you of listening to this. So this is a great episode. I think you'll love it. In fact, I know you will. So please sit back, relax, and enjoy this week's episode of TV Guidance Counselor with my guest, the one, the only, Peppermint.
TV is my friend, and it has been always there for me in time of need.
Peppermint, how are you?
Hey, Ken, I'm fabulous. Thank you.
You're quite welcome. I am very excited about this issue that you picked as well. I don't know. I may be far more excited than you are here, but when you said summer 92, I pulled this one out of the box and just the cover alone, I was like, oh, this is just prime. I mean, I guess we'd call it a paste up, this image here.
Okay.
This is certainly not something that happened in real life. We have Whoopi Goldberg in her Star Trek Next Generation garb. We have Michelle Pfeiffer in her full S&M Catwoman look. Ted Koppel looking like a little person Donald Trump for some reason. And Roseanne and then Homer Simpson all on the same couch with remote controls.
I mean, isn't that what? That's pretty much, it sums up, I think that the 90s were trying to say something, and this sums up what they were trying to say.
Yes. This is the unity of 1992. All in one photo.
Yeah,
it's pretty amazing. What about because I think you said summer 92 was what you were looking at.
Yeah.
Why'd you pick that?
Summer 1992 was just, There was a lot going on. Obviously, I mean, I think it takes a while. It takes at least a year for people to get used to major changes. And, going from the 80s to 90s was a thing. First, it was a thing like any decade. I think going from decade to decade is a thing. But going to the 90s, looking back, every decade has its significance, obviously. It gets us from one to the other. But the line between the 70s and the 80s, looking back, is probably a little more blurry, at least in my mind, than the line between the 80s and the 90s. There's so much technology that was like rushing in. There was so much that obviously cable TV became like,
Yep.
MTV knew who it was, and now, like in the 80s, MTV was figuring itself out, and in the 90s, MTV was like, oh, we know how to control all of you. Then all of a sudden we have court TV and all of these things. And so summer 1992, it was a mood.
No, I agree. And I always say decades don't end at the end of the decade.
They don't.
Yeah, the 50s ended in 1963. The 70s ended in 1984. And then, the 80s, I feel like exactly then. They didn't end till about 92. That's when it pushed into the 90s there. And summer was always the best because I would just stay up all night and watch whatever was on. And the cable channels and MTV specifically had a really smart thing, which we'll probably get into once we get into listings, where instead of doing reruns in the summer, they would premiere shows in the summer. So MTV was like, Real World starts in July. So it was like, it grabs you. Which is
and I don't know. Well, I don't know if that was really just because they've spent so long building television has spent so long building these schedules that we're trained to follow, that now they have this dead space, and that's when they're going to try some experimental stuff. I mean, not to get out of that decade too much, but when I was on RuPaul's Drag Race, I always thought of Friday night as a fun thing, but then I realized, I don't want to be on a TV show on a Friday night. That's when they put us. Yeah, no one's watching. That's when they put us. Now that's where the show is, and it obviously is a hit. But our show was the first one to move. It went from Thursday nights to Friday nights, our season, and we were like the experimental season, like later in the night, Friday night. I was like, this is no fair. And so I feel like that was like one of those slots, for a lot of those shows, summer in 1992. But so much happened. The Real World. We were just coming out of, I think more people were paying attention to things like C-SPAN and Court TV and the Rodney King. I don't want to go into too much, but like Rodney King had just had the trials were just happening. We were getting ready for OJ Simpson. We didn't know this, but we were getting ready for OJ Simpson later.
As ready as we could get.
As ready as we could get. Yeah. We had like Melrose Place was at its peak, which was like, quintessential 90s programming, 90210 and Melrose Place. Like neither of those shows, even though they were remade, belonged anywhere but the 90s.
Yeah, and I think 90210 this season also did a summer season. It was which always bothered me about school shows and teen shows. It was like, we never see what they do in the summer because the school year. And it's like,
there was something in the air summer 1992.
I agree. There's some great stuff here. And I was like, I get excited about TV Guide. I'm doing a show about it, obviously. But this one, like my sweet spot's kind of like 88 to 92. And this is like everything that I want in a TV Guide this summer 92. Because this article about like the zapper, all about the remote control, was actually really interesting. It was like a history of the remote control and how it changed television and like how MTV programmed based on like the usage of remote. It's like this really weird academic article about remote controls, which I was like, I feel like
wow.
Yeah,
I think that's probably around the time when you were able, I guess the zapper is, I don't have the TV Guide here, I don't have the resource, but the zapper, so this is around when people were like buying remote controls separately from the television. Like they were like, I got this remote control that does everything,
It's my universal remote. Yeah, because I remember before that, they would always have like a weird, like a James Bond hidden compartment. The remote would kind of sit in the TV sometimes. It was like...
in case you need to use this when you're away from the TV.
Yes, it's an emergency thing only. We need to have it. So did you grow up in Pennsylvania, right? Like outside Hershey-ish? Is that where you grew up?
I grew up in Wilmington, Delaware, but I was born in
Delaware.
Hershey, Pennsylvania.
Okay.
Uh-huh. But the areas are virtually identical.
It's fairly rural, right? It's kind of I've been to
It's
Hershey.
pretty rural. Yeah, Wilmington, Delaware is closer to Philadelphia.
Okay.
But it's it's the same accent.
Right. Okay. Fair enough. You still see Amish bacon things sometimes. I imagine.
Exactly.
But because we're seeing all this stuff too that for those of us who grew up, I mean, I grew up in suburban Boston, which wasn't super exciting. It was probably similar, but there's a ton of stuff in here that they're starting to program towards kids and teens for kind of the first time. And we're kind of seeing just like cool, weird underground art stuff, but like filtered towards kids, like the real world to what we were talking about earlier is like, I'm like, wow, New York looks cool. Like this looks awesome.
The real world is what hooked me. The real world, I mean, it obviously revolutionized television. We can't, we have to give that to them. And it covered, it was just the coincidence, like and I actually watched the new season of the Real World Homecoming, which is, they brought these original 7 people back in. And I loved every moment of it. But, it wasn't until watching this that I got a chance to see them talk about some of the things that they didn't air. And they were there in the house filming when Rodney King was happening.
Yes.
Like all of these moments that were like these seminal moments, like these are the Time magazine moments that are happening. And they obviously happen all throughout history, but like 1992 just squished a whole bunch of them in there. And in terms of programming, like I think the two that were really rising up, like 1992 was like the gold star year for MTV because of the Real World. And well, I'd say 1992 was a gold star year for youth television because of MTV's The Real World and because of Nickelodeon. And, just Nickelodeon really went in, and I don't remember I don't know all the listings. But I'm doing it from memory.
I get you if you don't know.
You got me for the listings.
Yeah.
But like, all of a sudden we have like, I think we have Double Dare and like just like all these shows. Now Double Dare was I don't think premiered in 1992, but
86 it premiered.
86. But like in early 90s, it was just like they like really turned it, like said, and that this was like my programming. I was like, Mom, this is my programming. And I, like you said, this is programming for the youth that like parents, I don't think parents would be interested in. It was like made with us in mind. There was stuff that was coded that I knew that my mom wouldn't understand. That was for us. As opposed to like, at least my feeling of like it being born in the 70s and watching TV in the 80s, a lot of that programming, it was like you could watch kids shows which were cartoons, or you could watch adult shows, and then maybe you'd understand what was happening if the adults would let you. But the early 90s, especially around that time, had programming for like teenagers, who they knew we're going to get them when they're not in school, when they're in the summer, when they're,
Yeah, it's funny because I always think of like youth programming before that, and it's just some like 60-year-old white guy who's like, kids like this, right? But we had younger people, and the people running at Nickelodeon or running MTV were not that far out of college and kind of still tapped into that thing. And MTV, we also got House of Style, which I loved.
Oh my gosh.
Like, that was amazing. And coincidentally, when we look at Saturday night here, this is the second week ever of SNICK on Nickelodeon.
I was just looking up, is this when SNICK? Yeah, I was just looking up SNICK. Oh my gosh, Roundhouse. Can we talk about Roundhouse?
What a weird show that was, because it was
oh my gosh.
It was like if they took In Living Color. And
yeah.
He said, combine the Fly Girls into the thing as well. And have people sing sometimes, and maybe we'll also do dramatic sketches for no reason.
Yeah, it was, but it was like catnip for me. I don't know how the rest of it lasted several seasons, so I think it did okay, but like, I think SNICK was, I would like to believe in my sitting here in my living room that SNICK was created for Roundhouse, the show. I think they needed, because it was the best programming that they had in the SNICK lineup. But I think I don't think people sing Roundhouse's praises enough. There were so many wonderfully talented people who came out of Roundhouse. Mickey Mouse Club was, I can't say Mickey Mouse Club is no longer relevant because Mickey Mouse Club gave us so many stars after that in the 2000s. Yeah. So it did. But it gave Mickey Mouse Club, I think, a run for its money. I didn't have Disney Channel. And if we did, I didn't watch it. Because I thought that Disney Channel was like for like,
it's babies.
You know, it's babies. What is this? I want like people talking about puke. I want to see, you can't do that on television. I want to see all that stuff. And so with Roundhouse and shows like that, like All That, like the show All That and all these other shows, this programming really was speaking to me. And these people like Ivan Dudinsky, like he's this fabulous director now. There's so many people that are really the tastemakers now who were performers on that show who are now behind the scenes. So many choreographers and people came through that wave of energy. I'm just like excited about it.
Yeah, no, it was, I mean, and it's funny because Nickelodeon and MTV were the same company. They were MTV networks. They were in the same building in Times Square. And they stood out because they weren't making a lot of TV in New York at that time anymore. It was like news, game shows, maybe some soaps, but not a lot of stuff. So by having this very New York vibe to their shows, especially MTV, which was not hiding the fact that they made it in New York. It was like very much like we're in New York. It definitely stood out as a totally different thing from that like generic America or Los Angeles. And it because of that, a show like Roundhouse had a bunch of people who went on to either came from like weird off-Broadway experimental theater stuff or went into it after, or, like the Adventures of Pete and Pete. You have a ton of people from like Hal Holden movies or Hal Ashby movies. And some of these like really amazing New York theater actors are like Toby Huss, who's like a really weird alt theater guy. It's just bizarre things that we would never get for kids. Like it was just, it didn't talk down to us, I guess, or try to.
It didn't. It talked directly to us. Like they were right on the same level, and it was like the perfect sweet spot. And then I think also like I was just in love with. I think it took a few years for Star Trek: The Next Generation to become a super hit. I don't think it became a hit, in my opinion, until the 90s. I think a lot of people were like, Star Trek, and then it became like, it seemed to have its cultural relevance later on. The TNG, like that specific version of the show.
Yeah, it was like a slow growth because I think, to your point, I think 86 it started. People were like, all right, nerds. It's kind of
more? Okay. Yeah.
But I am constantly surprised when I talk to people, because I think we're about the same age, but people our age-ish, and how many of them loved Star Trek: The Next Generation. And it'll be people I would never have guessed watched that show. And they never watch anything else sci-fi or anything else, and they loved that show.
That show did a really good job of not only speaking to the Trekkies, but also to people who, and maybe we were all just kind of dialed into like a certain kind of sci-fi. Like there was something about that show that I think it hit that prime time entertainment, but it had its sci-fi moment. It kind of picked up where not exactly, but it kind of picked up where, what was that show? Now, I mean, you would know. Quantum Leap left off.
Yeah.
And for those people that got drawn in, like, I think Highway to Heaven brought us to Quantum Leap, and then Quantum Leap brought us to Star Trek: The Next Generation. I don't know how I make that connection, but it's in my brain.
I could see that. I mean, I always equate like every decade we have a God show. So it was like Highway to Heaven, Quantum Leap, sort of, but wasn't as overt until later seasons when they were like, no, it is God. And it's like,
oh, wow.
And then we have like Touched by an Angel, an early edition.
Uh-huh.
But Quantum Leap is sort of that hybrid, right in the middle.
The tied together.
Yeah, where it's
Mhm.
a little bit more ambiguous. So, if you're not overtly like wanting to watch a Christian show like Highway to Heaven.
I didn't even take it like that. I was like, oh my God, how are they? Yeah, like it didn't feel like God to me at all.
Highway to Heaven has, I will say, one of my favorite Halloween episodes of all time. And
Really, what was that?
it's called I Was a Middle Aged Werewolf. And Michael Landon was in the movie I Was a Teenage Werewolf in the 50s.
Yeah.
And so in this, he actually directed this episode, and it's like an abused kid that he ends up taking him out on Halloween to go trick-or-treating, but he turns into the werewolf from I Was a Teenage Werewolf, like the full looks just like from the movie to like scare some kids that are going to beat this kid up. And
Wow.
it feels the most like Halloween felt when I was a kid, like going out and trick-or-treating.
Yeah.
So good. And I'm like, it's Highway to Heaven.
Now I'm gonna go back and watch it.
And because you're a horror fan, right? You're a big horror fan.
I'm a horror fan through and through.
So the other thing is the season before that, there's a Halloween episode with the devil in it, and the devil's played by Michael Berryman from The Hills Have Eyes, and it's like a straight comedy episode, but it has all these weird underground horror people in it. It's Highway to Heaven.
Highway to Heaven?
Yeah.
I used to watch that with my grandmother.
Yeah, you're seeing the guy from The Hills Have Eyes is in that episode Highway to Heaven as the devil.
I think I was too young to make the connection didn't. Yeah, I mean, I loved Michael Landon. I loved Highway to Heaven. But now I have to go back and watch. Right now I'm actually in the middle of binging, and it feels like the most accidental rewatch ever. Actually watching Melrose Place, and I'm like, God, get me through this.
It's slow, right?
It's so slow.
Yeah.
It's so slow. But I'm watching it. I'm like, I said I'm gonna watch it.
I had that problem with the X-Files because, like, I love the show Fringe. I don't know if you've seen Fringe. It was like one of my.
I've never seen Fringe.
It was about 10 years ago. It was J.J. Abrams. One of the best sci-fi shows I've ever seen. And everyone was like, oh, it's like X-Files. And I was like, I remember liking X-Files, but I wasn't crazy about it. As a kid, I like Sightings better because that was way more trashy. So I started rewatching it in COVID lockdown, and I'm like, this is so slow, and they clearly are making this up as they go along. Like it's just not doing it for me. Like we've had better stuff since then, and it's probably similar with Melrose Place. Like
absolutely, they're just they're just like making stuff up, and I mean, it didn't feel like soap in the beginning. I mean, it was very dramatic, like it was like melodramatic in that regard. But then it just felt like so soapy. Like towards like the fourth and fifth season, it's like, okay, they're just like juggling here,
right?
Because
when it started, it was more like about Andrew Shue's character, right? Wasn't he like the?
It was mostly about Andrew Shue and Courtney Thorne Smith's character.
And then they kind of just forgot about. They're like, they're kind of boring. Let's get Heather Locklear in and just mix some shit up here now. We'll blow things up.
Yeah, it was like exactly. They were like blowing the explosions and people dying. I didn't realize how much of a
Marcia
Cross. Marcia Cross. I didn't realize how much. I knew that she was in it, but I stopped. I think I stopped watching originally at some point. I must have stopped watching. Because I knew that she was on the show, and I remember her on the show, but she's like a major character in the series, like for a long time.
Yeah.
And she's like the source of so much trouble in the show. And she gets like another personality, and then she's that. She dies and comes back, and I'm like, oh my word, this is too crazy.
Oh yeah, and then Traci Lords comes in.
And then Traci Lords, I'm like, oh my God. And I'm like, Traci Lords, I like straight up remember her from like all of the horror and like porn stuff. And it's like, okay.
She did 3 TV shows. So the first thing she did post-porn was John Waters' movie Crybaby. And,
okay, of course. Yeah.
Which John Waters has a hilarious story of because Patty Hearst is in that movie. And Tracy was getting into some legal trouble around that time because of the age stuff. And so she was kind of nervous, but she might go to jail or something. And she was just confiding in Patty Hearst, and she's like, oh, I'm so scared of you. Have you ever been in trouble with the law? To Patty Hearst. And like totally sincerely, of all the people to ask that to, and Patty Hearst was like, yeah, a little bit.
Maybe. I was.
She did a Married with Children. She was in a bunch of episodes of Roseanne. She worked at that loose meat.
Oh, I actually remember her in Roseanne.
And then Melrose Place. But yeah, she had done like Not of This Earth before that, and that movie Skinner, if you ever saw that.
I didn't see Skinner.
Oh, it's like a slasher movie with Ted Raimi, Sam Raimi's brother.
Oh, okay, yeah. Oh, wow.
Not bad. But yeah, but we were getting these people who were sort of underground, sort of not mainstream cultural people bubbling up into mainstream culture and all these shows at that time. There was a ton.
I think it was really reflective about what was happening in music culture as well, because music was really starting to, I think the 90s was just like the biggest takeaway from the 90s was just fusion of everything. We were fusing rock and hip hop, and we were fusing, we'd obviously already done like Walk This Way, but like when did Sliver come out? Was that like 90?
Sliver was after Basic Instincts. That was like, I think it was 93. I want to say.
Okay. So like we have like ska mixing with like this pop, like nobody was listening to, I mean, I hate to say it, but nobody was really listening to, before UB40, nobody was like even knew what ska was. I'm sorry. Somebody did, but not everybody.
Right.
And so all of these like fusions of the different styles, and obviously MTV had a lot to do with that, and the music videos had a lot to do with that. And then really using, I think, I don't know. I don't remember. And this is me saying this from my position, but from exactly where I sit. But I think that like I know music licensing was always a thing, but like wanting to really say something and bring in music audiences into television and movies, like using music in soundtracks of TV shows like it's a movie was, I think, became really popular in the 90s.
Yeah.
And I there's a lot of 80s shows that 80s shows and movies and TV shows that I remember, oh, this song was popular after the movie, or it became popular because it was in the movie. Whereas I think in the 90s, it was like, oh, my favorite song is in this movie. Yeah. There was a lot of that happening.
Think of the 80s, I think of that Billy Vera and the Beaters song from Family Ties,
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
One big song, or like, I think they used a Tiffany song in like Growing Pains, but yeah, like the Melrose Place soundtrack, Boston band.
Yeah, it was like a thing.
Letters to Cleo, that made that band a thing. And and stuff like the Judgment Night soundtrack, which was that rap rock fusion, and those soundtracks became just as important as the movie.
As this, yeah, absolutely.
And that was, and they were like sort of pop compilations. And it's funny when I look back at this, because there was, to your point earlier about MTV especially, there's this sweet spot of MTV where it's post after they figured out what they were doing. Because for years it was just like, it seemed like cable access or something, which is kind of the charm, but wasn't quite the same thing. And then right before they decided, like, I don't know how to say this, it'll sound stupid, like before they went full corporate, or like before they just stopped being about music. So it is about 90 to like 99, like almost exactly. But producing, and we had stuff like Liquid Television.
Oh my God, Liquid Television. And we had Daria came through there, and Beavis and Butthead,
or like The State, or those weird cartoons like The Head,
oh my God, The Head, all of these things. Yeah, you're right. Like, and this was all the things that I think were coming like on TV on like late night as well.
Yeah.
They would like start late night, but that was when people were watching, and then they would bring it through, and it would come through to the day, because then during the day everybody was in school or at work, I guess. Yeah, MTV had some real major contributions to pop culture in the 90s, for sure.
Was that like your go-to, like get home from school, put MTV on? Just
it was yeah. It was go home from school, and I would watch whatever, just like the radio, like that. It was instead of I listened to the radio in the car. I wasn't driving, but I was like, we would put on the radio, and there was always music on to and from, and then once I got there, if I wasn't doing something specific, it would just put on MTV. And that was really the programming that I would watch. If there was like if a movie was coming on that I wanted to see or something, we would watch it on HBO. But for the most part, it was really about MTV. Like I don't know if I'm the MTV generation, but it sure was like a huge part of my.
I feel like we were, because even the stuff like MTV Spring Break and that kind of stuff.
Oh my God, Spring Break '92?
Yes.
I'm sorry to scream.
No.
Gosh. Yeah, Spring Break. I was like, where is this house? I need to go. I was so young and I needed to go to this house. Like I felt like I needed to go. And they did they started the house, I think, in the 80s as well.
Yep.
But like just that, like Salt and Peppa coming to do like Shoop, I think that summer.
Oh yeah, with En Vogue. That was
yeah. And that was the same year. What a Man. That was all the same year. And I was like, oh my gosh, and I remember hearing on that same year on Spring Break, which I'd never even thought. I had heard of Daytona. It was always in Daytona. I'd heard of Daytona a couple of times. Like I've heard of Daytona, Florida because of the racing, I think. Other than that, I had no reason to connect it at all in my brain. But when they brought, this is so random and no one's going to know, this British group that was apparently the En Vogue of Britain. Eternal is the name of the group.
Yeah.
And they had this song called Stay. And I was just like, I just fell in love with all of this stuff. And they were exposing us to like culture, you know?
Yeah. Oh yeah. It was stuff that you're kind of stuck in a small town or somewhat rural town. You know, like most of us didn't grow up living in the center of Manhattan.
Yeah.
Or in London or something.
Yeah.
And so previously to that, I think you would have had to have like a cool older sibling or like someone to sort of introduce you to this sort of stuff. And for those of us that didn't have that, this is what it was.
This is what that was.
Like a curated, cool older friends who were like, hey man, check this out.
And it felt like it was curated. It was for us. They were just speaking our language. And I don't the reason why I think that was a special time is because as opposed to now, I don't know, because I'm obviously not that same age anymore, but like, I feel like we weren't being overtly sold a lot. We were being sold like some culture, like some parts of culture and things, but like the products were as targeted.
Like, yeah, I feel like
as they are now.
Yeah, they hadn't cracked the code on how to like specific or like, it's like they got a supercomputer is like, we can do this and you won't even know.
Yeah.
The kind of guessing and fumbling around made it a little more interesting because sometimes it didn't work, or sometimes you would also get exposed to stuff that you wouldn't have seeked out on your own because it was just in there. Like, you're watching MTV Spring Break and there's an R&B group from England playing on a show with Roxette and Richard Marx and
exactly.
It's not a mix of things. Or even when I'm looking at the SNICK lineup, like you have Clarissa Explains It All, then Roundhouse, then Ren and Stimpy, then Are You Afraid of the Dark? Those 4 shows.
Oh my gosh. They could never. And I did not. You're right. And I did not want. The only reason I watched Clarissa Explains It All is because I would tape Roundhouse at a time, and sometimes they would bump the time, and I would accidentally tape Clarissa Explains It All because they didn't change it in the VCR, and that was the only time that I was like, oh, it was on before it, and so it taped that instead. And no offense to Marissa, what's her name?
Melissa Joan Hart.
Melissa Joan Hart. No offense, but like it wasn't my stuff. And
they're totally different shows.
Yeah, totally different shows.
Every show in that lineup, you would never program together now. Now when they do shows, it's like, let's do 4 shows that are all kind of the same show. So that people watch for 2 hours.
For hours extended. Yeah.
It's so strange. So did you go through Night by Night, or did you kind of flip through and see anything else that sparked your memory in here?
No, I did not.
That's okay. It's not a homework assignment.
Take me through some of the stuff.
So one question I had was because again, it's so much of this stuff that we've talked about is so New York centric. When did you first go to New York? Like, what was
my first time visiting New York was in the 90s. It was in 1996. And it was because of, I want to say, it was because of The Real World. It was because of Club MTV, Downtown Julie Brown. It was because of House of Style with Cindy Crawford. It was because of, and it was also because of this, I'll be honest, it was because of the Spice Girls To Become One music video, which was like, not even filmed in New York, but it was filmed in New York.
Green screen classic.
Green screen, yeah. But a very good, like if they didn't like talk about how the fact that they actually weren't there, I probably wouldn't have known that it was green. I mean, maybe now I would have known, but like back then I was like, oh, they're in New York, you know?
It's right to me.
Yeah, it looks just like it. And so those are the things that like drew me. But being able to experience so much, like you said, being exposed to all of these different things through television during that time, the fact that I was able to watch during the early 90s is what made up my mind in 1996, 97 to come to New York. And I moved to New York officially in 1998. I'm pretty New York centric, you know.
But it's even to give you the idea that that's a place you can actually go. Like it's to watch, like, because it almost seems like a fantasy land when you're watching all these shows where everything takes place there and there's all this cool stuff. And you're like, oh, wait, it's not that far. We just
couple hours from Pennsylvania.
Yeah, that's
Let's
what it was
go.
like. From Boston, I'm like, it's just like 3 hours there. I just drive down there. Which in hindsight seems silly, but it just didn't occur to me till I was older. Was there anything specifically that you thought New York would be like, and it either was exactly like that or wasn't, based on something you watched? Because like me, when I first went, I'm like, oh, it's going to be like Barney Miller in The Warriors.
Oh my gosh.
Not
Come
that.
out and play. No, my God, I hope not. Riding around some parking lot. Like, no, I didn't necessarily have any preconceived notions. One of the things that was really apparent to me that, and I'm so in love with, I'm like obsessed with finding and consuming old video and pictures of, I think I like old videos and pictures to begin, period, but old videos and pictures of New York, especially places that I can verify, places that I can say, oh, I know where that is now. That's what I love to do now. But back then, I think I was really drawn to, it was really these personalities. I think these personalities that came through in The Real World, on the TV show The Real World, came through in a way that I'd never seen a scripted character come through, and really resonated with me. Norm, and I'm going to tell you, I'm going to show you something this, because maybe you can appreciate this if I can tie it together.
Absolutely.
Norm is, I think I don't know if it's official, but like Norm was the out gay character, bi/gay character on, not that those are interchangeable, but there was a moment in which he was saying bi, but he lives as gay.
It was 92. That was like,
it was 92. Like that was the soft way to say it. Yeah, everybody wasn't quite okay. Yeah,
David Bowie used to say that too, just so people would be totally shocked.
Yeah. But being able to see him live his life, and I remember watching the show and him kissing Charles Perez, and then later on turning on the Charles Perez TV show and saying, wait a minute, and I knew, right? I was like, that's that guy that had kissed Norm. Was a thing. I had the opportunity to interview Norm and Heather B for this year for their return to The Real World Homecoming.
Very jealous.
Yeah, and it was awesome. Got a chance to get some really good juice there. But I fell in love with these people indelibly. Like and I know that everyone has those things for them. And for me, it was, these people are so special to me. So everything about that I can recreate in my own life, I'm going to do. Y'all were in New York, living your life. I'm going to go to New York and live my life. And that's what I just did. And I just never stopped. And of course, they left New York.
Yeah. I think Heather's like one of the only ones that's actually from New York.
She's the only one still here. But wait, let me show you what I have. Let me get up and I'll be right back. Show you what I have. I've such a never have the opopportunity to talk about any of these things. Okay,
Oh,
first
what's
I
wrong
have
with the world? This should be everyday chats.
I'm just because I had to walk by these I won't bring the shuttlecraft, but I have all of some of my collection of the Star Trek: The Next Generation
Nice.
original figurines.
Those
here.
I always remember were in the clearance bin at KayBee Toys all the
They
time.
always were, and I
Yes.
was so excited. Oh my God, KayBee Toys.
Yeah.
Yes, you're an East Coaster. And then I'm really proud of this. This is I haven't had a chance to display it yet, but Norm was kind of down and out on, because of the pandemic.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if you watched Real World Homecoming, but
I did. In the first episode, I surprisingly got like choked up.
Yeah.
I was like, what's happening?
It was emotional.
Yeah.
And so there was the housemates had all talked about how Norm should like start creating and making stuff. And he started painting these chocolate bunnies, and I purchased a chocolate bunny.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
From Norm, and it's a Norm original.
That's amazing.
I'm really and it says it has his signature and everything. It's the only piece of art that I've ever actually that's like cataloged that I've ever actually
that's the only piece of art you need. But it is true, like those people were so important because we were seeing the early seasons of that show truly were a mixture of people that wouldn't normally be mixed together.
Mm-hmm.
New York was a perfect place for it because that at that time was kind of like one of the few places that would happen. And yes, it was manipulated to a degree, but nowhere near like 10 years later where they decided we don't care about interesting people. We just want people that are going to screw each other and then fight.
In a hot tub. Like, what?
Yeah. But it's like, Norm was an artist and he was struggling with his art. And like, Julie was trying to be a dancer in New York, which is not easy. There were musicians. I do love that the Homecoming was basically 5 episodes of Sorry,
Becky.
Kevin. Sorry, Kevin. You were right, Kevin.
Yeah.
You
were right.
Yeah. And he was just like, yeah.
Which is so, yeah. It's it was what it needed to be. I mean, it would have been great if there was more, a little more expansive, but it was just, I think it was the reason why it was 5 episodes of that, I think, is because it was filmed over such a short period of time that they stretched it to those many episode. But I guess clearly, had they lived together longer, it would have gotten truncated. But that was a major moment. That moment with not only Becky and Kevin, but also Kevin and Julie. And I remember that was the first time I'd ever seen that sort of explosion happen about race on TV with people that I felt like I could connect with that were younger. This was obviously coming right from them, right? And before, race conversations about race were really not happening. And if they were, it was like on the news,
Or like a very special episode, like there's a Gimme a Break about Al Jolson.
Yeah.
Like
and did they really, like, they wouldn't say anything, and there certainly, it was, I remember like the perspective has completely done a 180, because before the perspective was give a Black person a chance kind of thing, and they would only focus on people as racists, but there really wasn't this focus on like racism as a structure,
right?
Like
it's
structural
like a societal
racism,
thing, like
a societal thing.
Yeah, it was very, and no pun intended here. It was very black and white, where they were. It was
very black and white. Yeah,
they're like, that guy hates Black people. He's a terrible person.
And that's it.
And that's it. Or it was like, but we'll. It was like the Grinch. You know what I mean? It was like, we'll teach him a lesson, and his heart will grow 2 sides.
Exactly, and then it changes. Yeah.
But it is much more subtle. Is not the word. I guess there's more nuance to it that never really came up because it doesn't really have an answer. So TV doesn't want to have a discussion about
They don't want to have a discussion when you don't have an answer. That's the truth. We can't sum it up in this 30 minutes. we ain't gonna do it.
Yeah, we don't wanna just throw the game out there and then just leave it, which is exactly what we got on that show, and it took that unscripted, when young people are, which is, I feel so old saying young people about them in the real world. But when I watched The Return too, I was like, oh my God, they're so much younger than I am now and then, because they seemed so adult when it was on.
They seemed, I thought I was watching adults, but it was so strange because they were adults that like I could identify with. Yeah.
But they're like 19.
Yeah. They're only a few years. That'll be us in just a few years. Just you hang on, honey.
I know, we'll get there. I'm wondering if they're going to do a return for like, I'd like to see in LA.
I want to see LA. Okay, am I crazy? I want to see LA. I want to make it to San Francisco.
Yeah.
I want to see LA, and I feel like we deserve, I want to go back and and listen, they did a great job. I have to say, MTV did a marvelous job. And they knew, jumping ahead, they knew what an unintended gift that was left in their hands with the legacy of Pedro Zimora.
Yes.
They obviously understood that, and I think that they handled that with such beautiful reverence. Being able to see someone living with AIDS, talking about HIV education. I mean, everyone was talking about AIDS and HIV. Like that was, people were talking about it. That's for sure.
But it was abstract in a lot of ways.
It was very abstract, and it really, for the most part, I think the most frequent people would talk about it was just like red ribbons. It was red ribbons at award shows in the first half of the 90s, and that was it. And so they did a really good job through the real world with doing that, and they know that. I would love to see them be able to come back and just bring some of those people back in the house so we can hear more stories of Pedro.
Yeah.
But I would also, but going back to LA, I would love to see Tammy Roman in that house again. Yeah. I mean, come on. Tammy has exploded.
Yeah. And like, what happened to David?
Where's David? I don't know where David is. He was in a couple of movies, and then that was it.
Yeah.
But I also am interested in where's Dom. I looked up Aaron, the model, the guy Aaron.
He was the most generic person.
He was so generic. That was their anchor, right? I'm sure in the casting they were like, we need this straight white guy who's like, all American. And he was like, I'm sorry, it wasn't. Did you know
that the house from that season you can rent on Airbnb?
Fuck. Excuse me.
Oh no, that's the correct reaction. Yeah, I'm
going to go rent. Yeah. Oh my gosh! It didn't even occur to me that I'm now going to go on a crusade to renting the houses from the real world. That's what I'm going to do.
Almost all of them are on Airbnb. Almost all of them. I've never done it, but I'm like, man.
You better fucking believe I'm going to do that shit.
You got to. And then I can live vicariously through you doing it.
You think I'm not going to be in Los Angeles? Okay.
Yeah, and then you can get Tammy to hang out there. But Dom is fascinating, and even John Brennan. I'm like, I rewatched them because they're all on Paramount Plus. They're
all on Paramount Plus now, and I did the same thing. I binged those. I watched them, and these ones, unlike Melrose Place, you can watch you could watch the entire season. And now, granted, Melrose Place was an hour, but you can watch the whole season. I watched the whole season in a night. Same. I was like, I'll stay up late. And I mean, I'll stay up really, really late, but I will stay up and watch this whole season. And granted, it was Melrose Place is like 30 episodes a season, but still, like it's so good to get easy to get through, I think. And yeah, I really would love for them to come back and bring those Los Angeles people back. I think that year was a great year. Having Tammy have this abortion, yes, on national television, first time ever that anyone had ever done that. Just like it was done in a way that I think was respectful, and it showed us like a little bit of what she was going through. I just get chills every time thinking about it because they were so successful at that.
It wasn't exploitative. It was sort of just matter of fact and everyday, even like the way Pedro was presented.
Yeah, he was dying.
But they didn't that's not what the whole season was about.
No, at all.
And I think we all knew of Magic Johnson before that, but he was a rich, famous guy. So everyone was like, yeah, whatever. But then you see this guy who's like a young guy who's not a famous guy, just living his life. That really did make a difference. And I've talked to Judd before because him and
I think
Pam
Judd are together. Yeah.
They're still married.
I know, and they have kids. And I've talked to him a bit on social media. And I think I'm just, listen, I know we're out of 1992, but Judd and Pam, the fact that they moved to Miami to go and take care of Pedro while his family was coming in to get everything together and like really take care of him was obviously a beautiful thing. And obviously a very special thing for especially, I think that there was a bond between Judd and Pedro for sure.
Like a true,
like an absolute bond. They showed us, I mean, that's obviously family, but outwardly that is what allyship really is. For queer folks, allyship for folks in the AIDS community or people who have AIDS and HIV. Like they were showing such love, and that wasn't really what people were doing with gay people in 1992 or 93.
They didn't
like
just
during that time.
Yeah, they didn't just do like a fundraiser. It was like,
like here's a fundraiser. Hope you good luck.
Good luck. Here's some money. You figure it out. Yeah. But there was like their true friend, and even to this day, like they'll like on anniversary dates and stuff, they share just like.
All about him.
Yeah, and it's not
so
like super maudlin though either. They're just like, yeah, he was really funny and a really great guy, and this is like some fun stuff we did. And it's kind of bad that stands out as being unusual because you want that to be how everything.
Yeah, isn't it a shame that it does? But Judd going on Pedro's speaking engagements after Pedro couldn't do it anymore.
Yeah.
Because this is all completely in a different thing, but thank goodness for camcorders in the 90s. I'll keep the 90s alive in this conversation. There was a video that I watched because I, of course, after I binged all of San Francisco,
straight to YouTube.
I had to go, straight to YouTube, and I found lots of video now that's now up on YouTube. I saw Pedro's audition tape, and I watched a video. It's a really heartbreaking video about Pedro, or with Pedro talking about who's going to carry on my legacy when I die, because I know I'm going to die.
Right.
And that's really, and he was saying that in front of a room of people and really genuinely asking that question. It was Judd. Judd did it. And that's just like, I think, a beautiful thing, because that was something that Pedro wanted and that we really deserved. And so to kind of, I would love for the opportunity for MTV to go back and give us the opportunity to sort of go back and really redeem those stories. Pedro's story. Let's hear what happened to David, because I know that David was in the wrong for snatching that thing off of Tammy.
Yeah.
But like, what happened to him? He disappeared. I think that had something to do with it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I was stand up, and I've asked everyone I know, like who was.
Where's David?
Like, what happened to this guy? And nobody knows. And it's because even the people who were assholes or didn't come out looking great, they're like 20 years old. When I think about that, like,
they're 20 years old in that house on TV.
Yeah, like you're gonna, who knows, And so I would like to see, what came to them. Like even with the new one with Becky, who was in some ways more insufferable than she was. I was still like, oh, okay, I get it. She's kind of trying, and I can kind of see what's happening, But I
see the best in everyone. Yeah. I feel like I needed Becky to be a part of this, and I was actually heartbroken that we didn't get Becky back into the house.
Yeah,
because I was like, Becky, come on, like let's restore this legacy a little bit.
Yeah,
and come on, what's it gonna be? One more night to spend?
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, she did what she felt like she needed to do. I stalked her on Instagram after that. She went and stayed in Long Island or something for the rest of the week. But I have love in my heart for Becky. Even though, of course, I do. She's a person, and she's deserving of that. Of our love and forgiveness or whatever. We can't judge her, but I do wish that she had stayed in the house. I think it would have, been better off for her and for the story.
Oh, I agree, but it was she wasn't painted as an arch villain like we started to get with the reality shows later, where it was like,
they would do, they would do that, and I think that's what they did by accident. Like that's what happened by accident because I think that it's just like the viewing audience is so used to having these really strong archetypes that we need. I don't know what comes first, the chicken or the egg.
Right.
If it's like the audience is like, if they trained us, or if we're like, that's what we want. But then they obviously started giving that to us later on in the later seasons, and it was so contrived. And then now you get people that audition thinking that that's what I'm gonna be the bitch of the house.
Yeah. It's like, just be yourself and you might be the bitch of the house.
Yeah, exactly.
Like even someone like Puck, who I still hated, like, I'm like, oh, he's like just like a 22-year-old douchebag who's trying to get like attention. I'm just like,
yeah, exactly. he's human. And I feel the exact same. And so I would love for the opportunity to see I definitely want to see Puck. I mean, I don't know if he's still in jail or what. But
who was the guy with the band in the San Francisco one?
In San Francisco,
Mohammad.
Mohammad doing? The poet and he's the poet and a rapper. Oh my God, Mohammad, and I think he was so fine. I would have married Mohammad.
He was a cool guy.
He was a cool guy, and he was just like a cool and. Yeah, I think he was just. I don't think that they focused much on Mohammad in the house.
There wasn't a lot of drama there with him.
There wasn't a lot of drama there, which means that he's a good person.
Yeah, he's like, I got my band, whatever, just hanging out, just doing my thing. Well, I don't want to take up your whole night because I'll talk real world till we.
You can tell I'm not even looking at the clock.
No, it's fine. But I now need you to make a show where you go stay in all the real world houses.
I actually will probably go and do that.
So I need this to happen. And we need to get like a petition going to really get violent.
Yeah.
Get the
to come in.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Tammy and David need to reconcile.
Just greet me at the you know what? I will tie up the loose closure with Peppermint. Like, come get closure with Peppermint, and I'll bring all the real world closure. And then I'll meet you at the house, and I'll bring you in. Come on, Puck. I'll bring you in, and Pedro's not there. We'll like put a prayer candle for Pedro, and we'll talk about it.
It's greenlit in the room. It's sold. Just don't even need a pilot. Well, thank you so much for doing this. It's been great talking to you.
Absolutely, it's been great talking to you too. This is amazing.
That's Peppermint. I mean, how great is she? If you're not already following her on all of her social media, you must do so. It's Peppermint247 on Instagram and Twitter, Peppermint NYC on Facebook, her website. Just look her up. She's the best. I really want her to do this real world show because that is amazing, and I could have talked to her about the real world for another 4 hours, and maybe we will someday, as I am a tried and true real world fan. If you have guests you would like to see on the show, or hear on the show rather, because it's audio only, unless you have synesthesia, and then you may see the show when you hear it, and if you do, let me know, because I would love to hear what you see when you listen to this show. You can do either of those things by emailing me at kennethwreed@gmail.com. That is my actual email address that I just mistakenly gave out to you when I meant to give out tvguidancecounselor@gmail.com, but it doesn't matter. You can email me at ken@icanread.com, any of those three that you want to email me at, or you can hit me up on social media. I am at Kenneth W. Reed, REID, or at TV Guidance on all the things. Also, we have a Patreon, and again, I cannot thank the people who are patrons enough. I thank you for listening, even if you're not a patron, but the patrons, we've been getting more patrons in the last year, and that blows me away. Even if you give $1, it is helpful to getting me to do the show. I hope to travel again and do these in person in the fall, and the patron money helps as I don't take ads. So that is how I make, I don't want to say make money. Let's say that's how I fund the show. Let's say that, especially now that I don't have conventions or stand-up to sort of supplement the show at the moment. But, that'll change soon. Anyway, we have a brand new episode each and every week, and next week will be no exception. So we'll see you again next time for that brand new edition of TV Guidance Counselor.
Highway to Heaven? I used to watch that with my grandmother.